So here we're going to be talking about solving equations with variables on both sides. So up until now, we've seen variables on the left and the right, but not really at the same time. Now we're going to have variables on both the left and the right side of the equal sign at the same time. And we're going to combine like terms. It's a little bit different from before because now we need to use inverse operations to combine them when they're on opposite sides of the equation. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that. Before you start this video, make sure you've done the warm-up. If you haven't, pause the video, do the warm-up first, get that checked, and then we'll move on to the video. So you can see what I'm talking about with variables on both sides of the equal sign. In our first example, we have 3x minus 4, and then on the right side, we have negative x plus 7x minus 1. That has a variable on the left, and actually two variables on the right side. We'll learn how to combine those in a second. Before that, we're just going to walk through the steps. I'll also walk through the steps as we do each example. Our first step with multi-step equations and our first step with variables on both sides is always distribute. And then combine like terms. You want to make sure you do it in that order too. Distributing is really multiplying. Combining like terms is adding. So we're still kind of following order of operations there, where we distribute first, we do the multiplication first, and then we do the combining like terms, we do the addition. After that, after we've combined everything on either side, on separate sides, now we'll move our variables to one side by adding and subtracting. And we'll move all of our constants to one side, again, by adding or subtracting. And what I mean by that, we're going to take all of our like terms, all of our variables, and I'm going to do, just on the first example, I'm going to move them all to the left side of this equal sign. I'm going to move all of my constants to the right side. After I have just that, I'll be solving a one-step equation. You can move all your variables to the right side and your constants to the left if you want. It doesn't really matter as long as you move all the variables to one side, all the constants to the other. What I mean by constants is just the ones without variables attached to it. So here that would be this minus 4 and the minus 1. So our first step is to distribute. We can't do that anywhere. I don't see any parentheses, so we're going to skip right past that. We're going to combine like terms. On the left side, we can't combine anything. 3x minus 4 are not like terms. On the right side, we can combine those. We have a negative x or negative 1x plus 7x. Those are both like terms. We can add those together. Negative 1 plus 7 is 6x. Everything else is going to stay exactly the same. The instructions also say that we want to justify each step. When I say justify, it really just means write the property that you use. The first step was really just combining two like terms. That's what we're going to say. That's our first property. Combining like terms, or CLT. Now our next step is combining all of the variables to one side. So I need the 3x and the 6x to combine. I can't do this like combining like terms. I'm not just doing 3 plus 6 because they're on opposite sides of the equal sign. If I need to cancel out something on one side, I need to use the inverse operation, or the opposite number. So here, I'm trying to move all my variables onto the left side. So I'm trying to cancel out the 6x on the right side. I can't just divide. Dividing by 6 only cancels out the 6. That only cancels out this multiplication by 6. That's not what I want to do. I want to cancel out everything on that side. So instead, I'm going to use addition or subtraction. Here I'm going to use subtraction because it's a positive 6x. I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. 6x minus 6x is 0. That completely cancels out. Don't need that anymore at all. The negative 1 is still left there. That sign is attached to the number. It's a minus 1 or negative 1 was really the same thing. On the left side, I'm going to combine like terms. It's 3x and minus 6x. I'm not touching that minus 4 yet. That is not a like term with either of these. So 3 minus 6 is negative 3x. And that minus 4 is just going to come down. Now I have a two-step equation that you might be able to solve on your own. According to our steps, we're just going to move all of our constants to one side. It's really going to be the opposite side of the variables. So it has to be on the right side here. Actually, let me go back real quick. I missed a step here. I subtracted from both sides. That's the subtraction property of equality. That's SPOE. On my next step, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I'm going to be left with negative 3x equals 3. I added to both sides. That's APOE. That's the addition property of equality. Now my last step, this is the one-step equation that I was talking about before. We have multiplication. We're going to undo that with division. Divide by negative 3 on both sides. So x equals negative 1. And we divided on both sides, so that's DPOE. Again, that's the division property of equality. Anytime you do something on both sides, it's got to be one of those PO properties. It's property of equality. It's just saying you're doing that to both sides of the equation. Now we're going to check that just by plugging it back in. We got negative 1 for x, so we're going to follow our substitution rules. 3 times negative 1 minus 4. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Minus 4 is negative 7. So we got negative 7 for the left side. Let's make sure the right side is the same. We're going to plug in negative 1 again. Negative 1 plus 7 times negative 1 minus 1. We have 2 negative signs here. That changes into a positive, so that's 1 plus 7 times negative 1 minus 1. We can do that multiplication next. 1 minus 7 minus 1. Now we're just going to work from left to right. 1 minus 7 is negative 6. Minus another 1 is negative 7. It's never an excuse for getting these wrong. You always can plug it back in and make sure you got it right, especially on a multiple choice question. There is no reason to get these questions wrong. You should be sure that you're getting it right because you can take the answers and plug them in, see which one makes sense. Make sure you're always following order of operations when you plug those numbers back in. All right, our second example, we are going to try to distribute or combine like terms if we can on just one side. So we can distribute here. We're going to distribute this negative 4. Negative 4 times x and negative 4 times this positive 2. Nothing changes about the left, so I'm just going to rewrite that. We're distributing a negative 4 into the x, that's just negative 4x. And then negative 4 times a positive 2 is a negative 8. I'm going to write that as minus 8. You can write plus a negative 8. It's much simpler to just write negative 8. Those are the exact same thing. Plus a negative and subtracting a number are the same exact thing. Again, we want to justify this. That first step was distributive property. So now we've distributed, and we can't really combine anything. We have negative 2 plus 2x, those are not like terms, and negative 4x minus 8, again, not like terms. Now we're going to move all of our variables to one side, all of our constants to the other. I'm going to choose the exact same thing as before. Variables on the left, constants, or numbers by themselves, on the right. So I'm trying to combine my variable terms on one side. I have to cancel out a negative 4x. I'm not dividing, I'm trying to cancel out the entire negative 4x by adding 4x to both sides. I'm going to add 4x to this to cancel that out. That leaves me with negative 8. Again, that sign is attached. And I'm going to add 4. If I do it on this side, I have to do it on that side. That's negative 2 plus now 6x. That property was APO, addition property of equality. So I have all my variables on the left side. I have just the 6x left. Now I want to combine all of my numbers, all of my constants to the other side. I have to cancel out a negative 2. Make sure you don't look at this operation. That plus sign is talking about the 6. We're trying to cancel out a negative 2. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. That cancels out. We're left with 6x equals negative 6. Again, we're adding to both sides, so that's APO. And our last step here is to divide by positive 6. Trying to cancel out multiplication, so we get x is negative 1. That's dividing on both sides, so that's DPOE, or the division property of equality. We're going to check this again. We have negative 2 plus 2 we have negative 2 plus 2 times negative 1, that's negative 2. And we're adding negative 2 plus negative 2, that's negative 4. Same thing on the other side, we have negative 4 times negative 1 plus 2. We're going to work inside the parentheses first. Remember, we're following PEMDAS. That's parentheses first, that's negative 4 times, that's a positive 1, which happens to still be negative 4. So we did that right. Alright, that one's very similar to the one we just did, so I'm actually not going to show that one. You can try that one on your own. Do exactly what I did. Show all of your steps, show the properties that you're using, and check it. I'm going to show the example number 4, so pause the video there and make sure you do number 3 before you move on to number 4. Here we have a number outside the parentheses on both sides, so we have to distribute here onto both sides. One of the really common mistakes here is that you show those arrows for distributing, and then maybe you add, or you actually don't do it onto the second number. Make sure you know that those mean that we're multiplying on both sides. So multiplying negative 3 into x and into a positive 1. That's negative 3x. Negative 3 times 1 is a negative 3. We're going to write that as a minus 3. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times 3 is a negative 12, so I'm writing that as a minus 12. Those are the same thing. This time I'm going to combine my variables to the right side and my constants to the other. So here I'm trying to move my variables to the right side. So I want to cancel out the negative 3x on the left side. I want to cancel out a negative number, so I'm adding 3x to both sides. That cancels out. That leaves me with this negative 3 equals negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1x minus 12. My first step, actually, I skipped over the justifying part. First step was to distribute. My second step, I added to both sides, so that's A, P, O, E. The next step, I'm trying to cancel out my constant on the right side so that I can bring it over to the left side. I'm canceling out a minus 12 on the right side by adding 12 to both sides. So I get 9 equals negative 1 times x. Our last step is to cancel out that multiplication by dividing by that exact number, divide by negative 1. Make sure you include the sign. When I say opposite operation, I don't always mean just the opposite number. There we're thinking about the opposite of multiplying by negative 1, so we're dividing by negative 1. And that gives us that x is negative 9. So those last two steps were APO, we added 12 to both sides, and DPO, we divided by negative 1 on both sides. We're going to check that one more time. I'm just going to do this a little bit in my head. Negative 9 plus 1 in the parentheses is negative 8. Negative 9 plus 3 in the parentheses is negative 6. I multiply 3 times 8, that's 24. And 6 times 4, that's 24. So we did that one right also. Alright, so we have our last example here. We can see on the left side, we have that 2.25 that can be distributed. On the right side, we have some like terms that we can combine. I'm actually going to do both of those in the same step. I'm going to distribute on the left side. 2.25 times 4 is 9. That one has an x attached to it. 2.25 times, again, 4. This one's a minus 9. On the right side, I'm going to combine like terms. I see that I have a negative 2 without an x and a plus 12 without an x, so I can combine those. Negative 2 plus 12 is 10. Plus 10x. So in my steps, I'm going to write that I distributed. And then I combine my terms. Really, I did that in the same step. From there, we're going to try to move all of our variables. I'm going to move them to my right side. And move all of my constants to the other side. So I'm trying to move all of my variables to the right side. That means I need to cancel out this positive 9x. So I'm going to subtract 9x from both sides. Remember, you're always using addition or subtraction when you're trying to combine like terms on two different sides of the equation. So we're subtracting 9x there, that cancels out, we get negative 9 equals, that's 10 plus, this is 10x minus 9x, that's just 1x. You don't have to write the 1 there, you could just write x if you wanted. I think it's making it more clear that there's just 1x left there, so I'm going to leave it. Now we're going to combine all of our constants to the other side. We want to get rid of this positive 10. I want to subtract 10 from both sides. That's negative 19 on this side, and that is 1x on the right side. You could think that we need to divide by 1 to cancel out that multiplying by 1, but we really don't need to because 1x is the same thing as x. So x equals negative 19. I'm going to go through those properties really quick. We combine like terms, and then we move this 9x over to the other side by subtracting. That's SPOE, subtraction property of equality. And then we, again, subtract it on both sides. SPOE, subtraction property of equality. We didn't actually even do the last step, but I guess you could, if you did this dividing by 1, you could say that's DPOE. And one last time, we're going to check this by plugging in that negative 19. So we have 2.25 times 4 times negative 19 minus 4. So we're going to follow order of operations we're doing in the parentheses first. I'm going to do a little bit of this in my head. Negative 19 times 4 is negative 76. Negative 76 minus 4 is negative 80. 2.25 times negative 80, well that's 2 of them, it's negative 160, plus an extra quarter of that is negative 20, so that's a total of negative 180. If you didn't follow that, you could always just do that in the calculator. And the same thing on the right side. We're hoping to get this negative 180 on the right side. So we have negative 2 plus, I'm going to do this multiplication right away. I know that's my first step. That's a negative 190 plus 12. And we're going to add from left to right, we get negative 192. Plus 12, that is negative 180. So thankfully I did that right. So again, we should never be concerned about whether we get it right or wrong because you can always plug it in and see to make sure that you actually got it right. Obviously it takes a little bit more work, but that's what smart people do. That's what successful people do. They take a little bit of extra time to do a little bit more work and make sure that they're actually doing something right instead of complaining about doing the extra work that actually ensures that you're being successful. There's my little wisdom at the end of our math lesson. Do your practice on your own. Good luck, ask for help. And again, you can always rewind this video if you didn't understand something.